Hey everyone, we just want to take a moment here to tell you about a podcast that we've become friends with. We're kind of co-podcast friends with another show, and it's called What It's Like To.
It's a podcast by Elizabeth Pearson Garr, and she interviews people who've done amazing things. For example, one of the episodes is what it's like to sail solo across the Atlantic Ocean. Another one is what it's like to be in the Secret Service.
Things you would not know, and then they get into the nitty gritty and really talk about that experience.
And you get to live vicariously through their experience. It's really cool.
Yeah, there's one on there that says how to start a college. Do you know what that's about, Adam?
I do not.
I think maybe that's one where our own Adam Braus is a guest. So be sure to check out What It's Like To wherever you get podcasts. I was going to ask you, how do you feel about just theoretically the concept of gross out eating challenges? Do you know what I'm talking about if I describe it like that?
Is that have to do with mukbang? That kind of grosses me out.
I don't know. I'm just thinking of things that
hot dog eating challenges, or what is it?
Well, that's like a quantity thing. I feel like this is odd things that are edible, but you might not normally eat. Sometimes it's flavor combinations that are weird. I saw someone doing one where they wrapped graham crackers in bologna, and that was a childhood favorite. They were like, try this. And the other person was like, no, thank you. Or things that you might not normally eat, like a classic one I see on Survivor or Fear Factor, whatever, is balut, which is a fertilized duck egg, but that's a thing they eat in like the Philippines, and we just don't. So you're like, what? Or snails are a thing that you eat in France that people are, that sort of stuff. Different, raw fish to a degree. Some places are like, no, thank you.
Or like
other places
scorpions
are like, that's super
or something.
Yep.
Yeah, bugs. I know. I lived in Thailand for a while, and that it's ethnically normal for them to eat bugs, but they would always go and like have like a cart rolling around the like foreigner district, like, oh, come and eat bugs, and everyone was like eating the bugs and having like a like an Instagram experience or whatever, where they take selfies while they ate the bugs.
Well, now this is where I'm going with this, because I have stumbled onto a place to acquire bugs to eat. Is this a thing that you would have any interest in or strong resistance against? Because I'm thinking of doing it for a different podcast I do and try to make my co-host, who will very much not be cool with it. But I think it's interesting, and I think it'll be fun to try and spring it on.
I don't want to make it sound boring, but I've eaten bugs, half a dozen times, and they're great. They're fine. They kind of, the articulation of their like legs kind of grosses me out when they're like in your teeth. That kind of grosses me out. So I don't eat them regularly. But I feel like what the product that needs to be created is like a bug cracker, like the same way that I don't eat like wheat hulls. I don't like just consume whole, the wheat is ground up and then I eat the flour. I feel like the same thing needs to be for bugs. Like they should make like a bug cracker, and it'd be great. I don't know why they don't make that.
I have not eaten bugs. I haven't tried this. I'm not against it. I just haven't run up against it. I've had strange foods, especially during my time in Japan. I had whale. I passed on horse, but I've also
horse
had
is the best food I've ever
squid.
Eaten.
Bro, what?
Dude, in Japan, I had horse sashimi, like raw horse meat, and it was honestly top 5 best things I've ever eaten.
That's the one I turned down.
Amazing. You made a mistake.
I was in Kyushu, where I was at first in Kyushu, Kumamoto, which is a prefecture down there, is famous for their horse sashimi, raw horse. And I was like, I was very new to Japan, and I was like, no, thank you very much. But now I kind of wish I had done it, especially with that review. That's incredible.
Oh, it's really I can understand if someone feels bad because they like horses or whatever, or they think of it as like eating dogs, which I probably wouldn't feel comfortable doing. But I don't know any horses, so to me, a horse and a cow is essentially the same thing.
Okay.
All right, should we do a solution? I got solutions for days.
Should definitely do a solution, but just
days.
For today. I can't be here for multiple 24-hour stretches.
Yeah. Okay, let's go straight into it.
Yeah, lay it on me.
Okay.
Uh-oh. It looks like you're about to confess something.
No, I'm not going to confess anything. I'm trying to be, I'm going to talk about women. And so I don't want to be, so I want to be careful.
What? Two men talking about women on a podcast has never gone wrong. I don't know why you are being cautious.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to be, I want to be, obviously 2 guys talking about women. That can't go well, maybe. But I'm going to, I believe it's important for us to risk it to do our mission here, which is to share new ideas, new solutions with the world that are I've never heard of before, and therefore I don't know. I think it kind of stirs the pot, makes it exciting, makes it better, makes us freer.
For sure. And I am more than willing to blame any negative outcomes of this directly to you and you alone.
Yes, please do.
Absolutely.
Yes,
we're both on the same page, I think.
But I will just say up front, like I've helped dozens, almost hundreds of women become software engineers and taking great pleasure in, being their, professor and helping them and made specific changes based on evidence-based education to make the college program that I run more amenable, which is a STEM computer science program, more amenable to women. Actually, I could talk a whole episode just on how to make programs better for especially STEM programs better for women, because I've done a lot of research on that. Anyway, so I've committed a lot of effort and time to try to help the liberation of all beings, but especially the more vulnerable ones, like women and other stuff. So anyways, just that disclaimer up front, I've been thinking about it in a weird way, which is, in this, we've talked about in this podcast, like earlier enfranchisement, like with voting. Mm-hmm. We have an episode a long time ago, we were talking about voting, but nobody seems to consider it to be a sort of oppression of women to have very, very, very late enfranchisement into essentially a fully fledged adulthood. But if you think about it, that's actually, for men, we have this great privilege of like, we can just have children whenever, mm-hmm. and we can just like start a family whenever. We could be 80 years old and we could start a family. It wouldn't really matter. Right. I mean, it'd be kind of weird for a lot of other reasons, but we could physically do it.
But old dads are physically possible.
Yeah, exactly. But women, I mean, and science has come a long way, and it's great, but like women, you get to be like 42. That that's kind of the updated number. It used to be like 35. Now it's more like 40. You're pretty much hitting the place where you have like a pretty high chance of like your eggs not really working, being fertile. Like your eggs kind of don't work, and you have chromosomal issues. Like you can have like more Down syndrome children, and there's a lot of like riskier problems that can happen.
Yeah.
Well,
and then physically, just the limitation, like you're female biologically. Women are born with the set number of eggs and then release them periodically, and they don't make more. And men create sperm throughout their entire life, allegedly, like as a healthy thing. So, yeah, it's just a difference in biology too.
But for some reason, and this is why this is supposed to be like a new solution. Which I'll just come out and say the solution is we should drive earlier enfranchisement for all young people, but especially with an eye. We should do that for everyone. But really, we're doing it because it helps women.
Okay. Now,
and
help me with the word enfranchisement. What
I'm using that as I'm using that as like a catch-all. I think generally it means just like can vote, which we've already talked about. Mm-hmm. I don't just mean voting. I mean like all types of enfranchisement, like everything. Like you can be a fully fledged adult who has their own household and their own rights and incomes and privileges and paying taxes and being just like a full citizen. And someone might say, oh well, that's 18, you have that at 18, but it's not. Everyone knows that's not true. Like you can't drink until you're 21, but maybe that doesn't matter because it's sort of just this permissive thing. But it's bigger than that. When you meet an 18-year-old, they're not treated like in a way where they are treated like a fully enfranchised person.
Right.
And the same thing, like if you talk to anyone, especially in the knowledge economy, people really need like a bachelor's degree and then maybe a master's degree and then, a few years in a career before they really are in a place where they can then maybe, be in a position where they're actually, could have a family, and like be really a fully fledged, grown adult. But if you look back, even 200 years ago, by the time you were 20 years old, you could have a family, right? And if you go back 1,000 years, if you go to an unindustrialized place, when you're 14 years old, you could have a family.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's like a good thing or something we should aim for, but what I'm saying is they're in those societies 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago or in a pre-industrial society, people are fully enfranchised at 14. And that's actually good. That's actually a good thing because then that person can have more years of freedom and more years of choice and more years of being like a fully accepted, fledged they still have things to learn. They're still a young person, but they can engage with society fully. Whereas in our society, it seems like it's going the opposite direction. Like we claim that we're like more advanced than these other cultures or like from the past.
Right. And back then it was a situation where we're like, oh, our wise elders are in their 40s because people in their 60s and 70s don't exist because, human mortality. And so like you better grow up early, because if you're waiting until 25 to start your adulthood, then you've kind of missed it and you don't have much left.
Yeah. And I mean, for men, maybe it doesn't really matter. And I'm happy to say that. Like we have this privilege of just being able to start a family whenever, and so we can wait until we're like 30 years old to have started a career and got our education and done everything. But women, man, it really comes down to the wire, and women are experiencing a huge. I'll go out on a limb here and say, from my research, not super scientific research, but just looking around, people are really. There's a ton of anxiety among women about, I've got my biological clock. You hear people say that all the time. Yeah. My biological clock is ticking. I've got to do all these things in this time frame. And it's like, with evidence-based education, which I'm an expert in, so I can speak with authority on, you can educate people now using research that's come out in the last 20 years, since 2000. Okay. You can educate people at probably 2 to 3 times the speed than you could before. Also, there's just so much less you need to learn now because we have such amazing tools to like look things up. All you need to really learn is how to look them up. And then you're done. I mean, your education is like, you just need to learn like critical and creative thinking, and you're pretty much done with your education because there isn't a ton you need to like memorize, Well,
as long as you know the things that are memorization, like dates and date and names, if you know where to reliably be able to look these things up, that's as good, if not better, than trying to store it all in your brain. Always.
And there's so much information, and it's unclear which of that information is important. We really should just let people like whatever they're interested in should just be, like we don't ask anyone to be like an excellent photographer and an excellent ballet dancer. We just ask them to be like an excellent photographer, and that's fine. And that's the same thing with knowledge. Like we can just let some people be really excellent, history buffs, and other people can just be like really excellent, math buffs, and that's kind of fine,
So I think you hit on something that I feel like is key to making this happen, because that 18 number does seem sort of arbitrary. It's like, why do we pick 18? And I'm thinking, 18 seems like it's there because that's when primary school is finished. You're essentially graduating from high school at or near 18, and you're like, all right, I'm 18 now, I finished my primary schooling. But you're right, if education becomes more efficient, let's say we can pack that 18 years worth of knowledge into 15 years, then why not start it at 15, when you go, okay, now we are you've got all this stuff to start with, and you can go college 15 to 18 or whatever, but you could also start in the workforce, and people aren't like, or 15. Now it feels like I'm advocating for child labor, which is absolutely not what I'm trying to do.
Scott, come on. I don't mind the number, the 18 number. I'm more concerned about the let's think about just the average sort of person who wants to enter the middle class in America, right? Mm-hmm. They need to go all the way through 18. Then they need to do 4 years, average 5 years. Probably. Now the average college is 5 years. So now you're 23. And now when you graduate college, everyone knows that the first 2 or 3 years out of college are complete throwaway years. Like they're just like garbage, And so, and you make, you do some missteps, or you start one stuff out. You try some stuff out. It doesn't work out. A lot of people are having a year or two of mental health problems or some kind of crisis or issue that they have to deal with healthcare for a year or two. Mm-hmm. That burns out. Okay, now you're 25. Maybe now you're like, okay, I'm going to I have either a more serious job, or I'm going to get a master's degree. That takes you 2 or 3 years. And then now you're going to say, okay, now I'm in my career. I'm 28, 29 years old. You want to have a few years where you just get to like be yourself too, because those were just all grind years. All of those years were like grind years. You probably want a few years where you get to just like, I don't know, work a job and hang out and have fun and sort of be yourself. Now you're now you're 31, 32. Women are already pushing up against that 35 number, which really is maybe more like 40, but honestly, 35 is still kind of a number you want to hit when you're like getting, going to start to have kids and stuff. So basically just a standard middle class sort of knowledge worker person isn't really fully enfranchised until they're about 29 or 30. And it's just a bad, like no one's made this a policy. It's just like everyone's just like laissez-faire, like let's just let things be the way they are. But maybe we should make a policy or make policies that try to ratchet that down to the point where people, when they're 22, are in the position that now today you are in when you are 29. You know?
And so that makes sense now why you're using the word enfranchisement, because that is what you're describing. You're like policies that could empower and like uplift people during that like kind of milieu of their 20s where they're like, I don't really know, and I haven't got a good our society isn't built to help me necessarily figure this out. Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, it's built to exploit you, right? It's built to work you without paying you very much. And
I remember my 20s and being like, I don't know. I'm trying stuff out. I don't know. And I didn't have the pressure of, okay, I need to choose right now career path or family path, which some people are put under that pressure, or the negative stigma of like, we're going to hire you, but you better not decide to like have a family or else we're going to negatively impact you. And it's kind of like, oh, do you like humans? This is how they're made. That's part of the that's part of the business.
But not everybody had the privilege that you did of being a professional squirrel suit base jumper at 20 years old.
I beat out a lot of people. I beat out a lot of people for that position.
I know, that's what I'm saying. A lot of us we're not as dedicated to like such a lucrative career at that young of an age.
That's on you. You could have been. I took my Doogie Howser years and I spent them studying flying squirrel suits so that I was the best.
That's some good biomimicry right there. Squirrel suit jumping.
The people with the wingsuits, the videos of them flying through the caves in like Argentina or flying like through the canyons and just narrowly missing cliffs gives me high amounts of stress just from watching in my safe chair. Definitely not doing it. That is not an activity suited for me. I couldn't handle that. Okay, wait, back to the enfranchisement. So how do we? Well, I understand the concept now. Yeah, and I agree with the
premise,
the oomph behind it. Yeah. So how do we make that change? What would that look like?
It's not so. There's two kinds of ways to solve a problem. There's like a moonshot or what I call the piranha process. The piranha, throw piranhas at it. So it's
wait. You look at every problem. You're like, well, there are two solutions, and one of them is always piranhas.
It's either piranhas or the moon. Well, I guess you could say this: a silver bullet or silver buckshot, right? So silver bullet is like there's one thing you do it and it just solves the whole thing. That's that sometimes we have solutions like that on this podcast, but this is more like a silver buckshot where you have to hit it with like a dozen different or 20 prong approach. To drive down, and each one's going to give you back like 6 months or 8 months, and then if you do like 15 of them, you might get back like 7 or 8 years.
They compound on each other.
They compound on each other. Yeah. So I mean, I think the key one, in my opinion, is evidence-based education.
Okay.
So there's no school in my research that I've done. There's no school. I should say there's lots of every school does something right because they would be complete failures if they weren't doing something right.
Sure.
But then they don't do everything right. And then also, which is kind of sad, there are certain things that each school, depending on their sort of philosophy, refuses to do philosophically, but actually evidence says they should do that thing, and that's everyone. I mean, like left, right, center, it doesn't matter who you are.
Would something
they
like
always
that,
have some bias against it.
Is that like a cost-based reason they wouldn't do that, or just like
it's
we like the status
ideological.
quo, we don't try new stuff? Or
it's just ideological. Like for example, you can go in. So I'll give you a controversial example, but I mean, and you just have to look at my book if you don't trust it.
Which book would this be? Please plug.
It's called Motivate.
Thank
which
you.
is all about motivation and evidence-based education, but around the idea of motivation. So here's an example. Extrinsic rewards. People are always like, oh, you should never use extrinsic rewards. So more like kind of left-wing sort of lefty sort of schools will be like, you shouldn't ever use any extrinsic rewards. And
extrinsic rewards being like paying someone for good grades.
Candy, money. Yeah, exactly. And then more like, I don't know, business side, right-wing sort of business-centric sort of people might say, well, I pay my kids for good grades and I give them rewards when they do good. I give them things, and that's fine. That motivates them. It motivates me, so it can motivate them to do better in school, whatever. Anyways, so there's some schools where people are more on that kind of no extrinsic, and they will say like vehemently, we will never do extrinsic rewards. And so they are ideologically blocking using extrinsic rewards. So it turns out there's a way to use extrinsic rewards that works for learning, and then every other way doesn't work as far as the research is concerned. And that's just for inputs and outputs. So if you, for example, pay, I was given $20 for every A I got on my semester, whatever grades. That doesn't work because that's outputs. So if you pay for outputs like grades or how well you do on a test or whatever, that will have almost no impact on the student's achievement. It won't increase achievement.
So
but if you pay for inputs, that works. That works really well, actually, like incredibly well. So if you pay if you say, hey, go on Khan Academy, and if for every lesson of Khan Academy you finish, I'll give you $1. And there's like 1,000 of them on there, and the kid's like, holy shit. And they go and do 250 modules on Khan Academy, and you write them a check for $250. That's worth the money because you just got the kid to do like a ton of math and science training, and you only have to pay him $250. There's like nothing. That's like three tutor sessions with some tutor, right? So, or the same thing, like if you could say to a kid, like, if you read any book, here in this list or something, I'll give you $5, and you have to read it and write a little thing to show you read it. The kid's just going to tear through. They're going to become a voracious reader, and all you had to do is pay them like, I don't know, $200 of like if they read 50 books or whatever.
So does that not count as an output if you're like, you read the book and then write a report and I'll pay you for that? Or
well, it's just an input because you're having them put in the time. Read the book, do the math problems, complete the Khan Academy, complete the thing. Like, for example, if you have a kid, we're getting a bit in the weeds of this, but if you have a kid and the kid says, I have a big math test on Friday, and you're like, if you do a good job on the math test, you can go out this weekend with your friends. Bad idea. That's bad. That doesn't work because you're paying for outputs. But if you say, if you study for an hour every day this week, I'll give you $10 per hour. And at the end of the week, you'll have $50. And that's how much you need to go out with your friends this weekend. That will work. Because they'll actually go study, and the studying will help them get a higher grade on the test.
Let me try one. So if I'm a clarinet player and I, instead of being paid for playing my song beautifully at the end at my concert, you pay me to just do regular practice sessions instead, that is a more effective way than trying to, and then me being nervous and be like, I don't know how to do all this, but a lot rides on this final performance situation.
Also you're reducing that anxiety about the performance. Yeah, totally.
Okay.
And the same thing could be said about competition. A lot of people think, there should never be competition in learning, but it turns out there's a certain way to do competition that works really well for everyone, for even non-competitive people. It works really well. And all these things. So anyways, schools do, every school I've talked to, which is many, dozens, they all do something right, but no one does everything right. And they actually only do like one or two things right usually. And then they're just riding on the coattails of doing like just two things right. When there's like, just my book alone is like 42 chapters, and every chapter is like two or three things you can do to make a school better. So if we did evidence-based education, the pace of learning and the quality, not just the pace of like how much knowledge you can cram into some poor kid's head, but the actual like cultivation of intelligence and creativity and abilities and capacities explodes. It goes up by easily double, and I think probably even faster than double. I mean, I think so. There's some evidence that some schools that are employing some of these techniques that they go 5 times faster, maybe even 10 times faster in some cases.
Okay.
Like there's cases where a student will say, hey, I really want to learn math. And they're like 9. And then they're like, I really want to learn math. And then the school allows them to learn like at their own pace. And they learn like 8 years of math in like 2-4 months. You know what I mean? Which is 10 times the speed, Yeah. So there's ways where you can learn, potentially you might be able to learn somewhere between 2 to 10 times faster and more and better. So just evidence-based education could make it so that by the time you finish high school, you have easily as much knowledge as someone who's finishing college in America.
Yeah. And this does remind me of like when I was in college, there were some classes where like, they were like, yeah, man, 50% of your grade or whatever, or is this final test, or even like a giant chunk of your, we don't offer homework. We don't care. You can show up for class or not. You nail this final test or you don't. And I think it sounds like what you're saying is that leaves a lot of people out and leaves a lot of people behind who can't like self-regulate up until then and don't motivate themselves.
Yeah. High stakes testing is no bueno.
Yeah, it didn't feel good. I mean, at the time, you're like, when you proposed it as a kid, you're like, oh, I don't have to come to class and all I have to do is cram right at the last minute. But what you're saying is, I don't have to like learn the material. I just have to store it for a short amount of time and then output it, which is not, that doesn't help anybody. That's just a paper on a grade on a paper.
Yeah, high stakes testing is bad. There's a whole, I mean, I don't want to get into it because it'll bore the tears out of people who aren't like a huge education nerd like I am, or you are too. We're both sort of education nerds, but for everyone else on this who wants to listen to like a cool new solution, they're going to be like, what the hell, all these education stuff. But yeah, there is so much to assessment. Assessment has like, there's many things you can learn about scientifically about how to assess people, and not just how to assess people, but actually the way assessing people either helps or hinders their learning, and how you can do assessment in ways that really, really enhances people's learning. For example, diagnostic assessment. People do way too little diagnostic assessment. So there's way too
what is that?
Well, people always say, like whenever you can think back to any class you've ever taken, you just start. They don't ask you how much you know about the topic when you start.
Flying
they just start. They just go straight in. Yeah, exactly.
They were like, what's your base level knowledge? Okay, yeah, I got you. Okay, that's how.
And you're like, I've seen a squirrel. Okay, well, you're pretty much at the beginner level.
They were like, you're the teacher now. Here you go.
Welcome to the stage. It's like Catch Me If You Can. You just come up and get on stage.
Yeah, I was sitting and I was like, the teacher was late, so I walked up and I was like, hello, Mr. Abernathy.
Yeah, right. I'd start writing on the board. Mr. Abernathy. Not Abernathy, not Abernetty. Abernathy.
I'm impressed that I pulled that name out.
Yeah, you did. You knew it right off the bat. I didn't remember it either until you said it. Yeah. But so we could do evidence-based education. So there's something around like red shirting. Like, have you heard of this concept of red shirting?
Yeah. From Star Trek.
Yes, the red shirts.
That's the people who die immediately as soon as they go on the excursion. That's obviously what you're referring to?
That's what I'm referring to.
No, so I've heard it with I've heard it with college athletics, where they especially will redshirt someone to not use a year of their eligibility in college athletics.
So people do it for kids, and there's this pattern now that people say is, if you have, especially for men, they say if men are born, say in like June, you should actually not start like when you're 5, because you're going to be one of the youngest 5-year-olds in the class. You should wait a year and be like an older first grader or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's called redshirting. And there's good evidence to show that it's actually good to do with men. And we should really just redshirt all men, honestly. I mean, that's kind of what this episode is also saying. Is like, let's just redshirt all men. So men should just be like 6 when they start first grade, and women should be 5. Well, because if you do that, the men and
we know
with the
girls, mature faster, and
like a lot of teachers will say, "Oh, my boys are just like all over the place," and and it's like, because they're literally a year behind the development, as the girls. So people are comparing apples to oranges when they compare men to women of the same age.
So I was that was kind of my situation, because my birthday is in September. It's like right at the cutoff line, and I do remember my parents had an option to put me in like a year before I was in, or the year I was in, and they opted for the older version. So I was one of the older kids. Like
that's great. So
I turned 18 in my senior year, and I was like, I remember because I like had a job and I was working at a video store that I couldn't have had if I wasn't 18 yet, and I did that my senior year. But I think my parents wanted. Well, definitely I was an immature kid, but they probably were like, well, he's kind of tiny and maybe he would be bigger as well and not And that didn't work until junior year of high school, but
me too. I shut up junior year too. I was I was like average height, and then junior year I was like taller than everybody.
Yeah, we're a couple of tall guys now, so it's fun to think of. I do think of that. I grew up with like a small guy mentality because I was one of the shorter guys until 11th grade.
Yeah. So you were sort of redshirted. So now that pattern is going earlier. So it might even be like if you're born after January only, you might still
hold it back. Okay.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, this is sort of a sub solution here, but I think we should just redshirt all men. So all men should start school when they're 6, and all girls should start school when they're 5. And I think that would lead to better outcomes for men and also easier for the teachers. But it wouldn't lead to earlier enfranchisement for the men. That would actually delay their enfranchisement by a year. But like we said, for men, it doesn't matter because who cares if their enfranchisement is delayed a little bit? Actually, it's probably better because men, are engaged in more risky behavior than women. So it might be better for them to have like another year with the bumpers on,
Yeah.
Before they,
by that, sure. Before they let them off to be like wild weirdos.
Exactly. Which we all become. Yeah. But that doesn't help with the women enfranchising earlier. So that's not sort of neither here nor there. But other ways to get the women to enfranchise earlier is, I mean, the really big thing for me is college definitely should not be 5 years long. And I think it shouldn't even be 4 years long. Like, I think, especially with what we just said about evidence-based education and with the shifting sort of structure of the availability of knowledge, you can get everything you need to know to be a fully fledged, or not fully fledged, but fully fledged in the literal meaning of that word, which means all your feathers are grown out. Doesn't mean that you're the best flyer in the world. You still have a lot of flying to do to get better at flying, but your wings are fully ready to fly. Right. Yeah. And I think we should be aiming towards 3-year colleges. And this is what actually you're already seeing among innovative new colleges. So
because it does feel like, it feels like education technology, they've been improving it constantly, making it more efficient and more like new tools, new things. But that 4-year like ideology of like college has stayed there, which feels to me kind of a top down thing. Cause they're like, well, yeah, of course we the college want 4 years of your payment to us. If we made this more efficient and you were able to get the same amount of actual learning done in 3, well, then we lose out on 25% of our revenue. That's not going to work for us. So they're incentivized not to make it more efficient, even as the world creates better and faster tools that we can use for this.
Right. Exactly. The incentives institutionally are bad for the public.
But with that knowing that if a college, like a major college, was to do this kind of paradigm shift like you're talking and come out and just put it on Front Street and say, hey, we've looked at all this stuff. We can get these 4-year degrees done in 3 years. We're not cutting corners. We're not leaving stuff out. We're just being efficient, and we're just trying not to milk you for your tuition dollars. That could be like a huge PR marketing thing where it's like, come and get it here. It's not a lesser thing. It's just you're paying less. And that might be a domino that gets other people to be like, all right, fine.
Are you intentionally pitching my
program
that I run?
No way.
I mean, well, not just me, but almost all new college. So I'm writing a new book. New book's coming out probably before Christmas, and it's going to be called The Caging of the American Mind.
Okay.
And it's all about this.
It's all
about how higher education is like locked down and no one can start new colleges. It's not allowed. But I talked to 5 colleges, and then I'm a 6th, that are starting new colleges and fighting against the system and not and being pushed back. I mean, they won't accredit us, for example, but we still are. We believe so much. All these people believe so much in education and improving it that they kind of don't care. And they're all nonprofits. I talked to for-profits, but I didn't include them in the book because there's a whole host of problems with for-profit schools. I'm not interested in them. And my school is a nonprofit as well. So yeah, but almost all of them are offering 3-year degrees. Because exactly that. They're like, why would we offer, like, we can do the whole education in 3 years, and why would we do 4? It just costs more, it takes more, it steals a whole year of time from someone who's only going to live 80 or 90 years if you're lucky. Yeah. So if you take one of those years away, that's a lot of time that you're taking from them. And from the women, this is my point too, is I think we really need to think about it as a women's liberation issue.
Mhm.
When you extend franchisement, you're really harming the women. That's who you're harming more than the men. The men are fine. They can take another year. Who cares? They can start a family when they're 40,
Yeah.
But the women can't. They can't just start thinking about a family when they're 40.
Because you're not pushing back that end time. You're just shrinking the amount of total time until that end date.
So if you could get as much knowledge as you have now by the end of college, which in America honestly is not very much. Sorry, college graduates in America, but you don't know very many things. European college graduates are way smarter than you are. But so I think, because we need people to be more educated too. So I'm not saying less education. I'm saying more education. So if you knew as much as the average American did by the time you graduated high school, and then there was a 3-year college program, so then by the end of that 3 years of college, you had a bachelor's degree, but that became all you really needed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you didn't need a master's degree or PhD. That would just be for researchers, which the economy doesn't need that many researchers. It needs a lot more, people who can work. You know, so if you finished, then you would be at 21 years old. You would be fully enfranchised. You would have essentially, you wouldn't need any further degrees unless you were to become some kind of researcher, and you could enter the workforce at full speed, fully fledged, and be confident to get a high quality job at 21. That's what I think we should aim for. I think we should try to get to that point.
You turn 21, they're like, here's your degree, here's your legal martini, and congratulations,
exactly.
You're on your way to adulthood.
Fully fledged. Boom. Don't get me started on how we should lower the drinking age to 16. But or follow the Germans. What do the Germans do? They do beer and wine at 14 and hard liquor or beer and wine at 16, hard liquor at 18.
I don't know.
That's what we should do in America too. It's so obviously better. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. That's certainly not a new solution. People have probably all heard that. But this idea that the fact that we don't that we're lengthening enfranchisement is an attack on women. Whether the people who are doing that are intentionally doing it or not, I don't think they are, because I don't think people think about it in this lens.
And even after you get a degree, you're 22, 23, 24, whatever. You start out, maybe your first 2 years, you're an intern or something, not even that you have to go through this kind of onboarding, not even part of the actual work, not thought of as a full adult until later, even later. Yeah.
And now you're really teeing up my programs, because in my programs that I'm starting, people start working during the program and we give them credit for the work they do in the program still. So by the time most of my graduates from my programs, when they're hired, they then enter the office and they're working, and their people around them say, "Where did you work before this?" And my 21-year-old students say, "This is my first job." And they say, "Gosh, you work like you've been working for 2 years already." And it's like, "Oh yeah, because in my school, I was treated like a kind of like a young employee, and I had expectations, and we used the tools that business uses." And so they were like they had worked for 2 years by the time they graduate. But what other college can say that? None. I've never, most people say, "God, you just got out of college, you suck at this." You
go to do a job and they're like, "Okay, we might take a chance on you, but we're trying to figure out if you can do this job." And if you're already like, "Well, I've been doing this job," like it's not that's not in question anymore. That's a huge bonus for you. And like you're saying, when you get in there, they're like, "Okay, how are you so good?" And that's a wonderful, wonderful point of confusion, other than the boss being like, "How are you not able to get it still? Like, you have a college degree and I'm telling you what to do and you're not doing it right," or whatever.
Yeah. And I'll just call out elite colleges because I'm quite judgmental of them, and say, I have multiple friends who hire Ivy League students, and they are always like, "These Ivy League students are useless and so self-entitled, about things." So, I mean, it's not like, oh, the elite schools are preparing people and the non-elite schools aren't. It's like, no, none of the schools are preparing people for really being prepared for a job. The elite schools just give you a sense of entitlement. So you kind of walk around and swagger around like you own the place.
Right.
And the non-elite schools don't give you that similar sense of entitlement. So you may be kind of, you're kind of
shirk around a little bit.
Yeah, you sort of shirk around and lurk a little bit, and which I don't know. In some ways, it's better because you actually don't know what you're doing. But yeah, I think that with evidence-based education and with new colleges, that's kind of the key thing that I'm showing in this new book is that it's illegal to start new colleges, and we need to make it so that qualified people can start new nonprofit colleges. I don't care. I'm not trying to fight for the for-profits. I mean, Personally, I think it's fine for for-profits to start, but I don't want to fight that battle. Like, fine, don't let for-profits start, but let's let nonprofits start. Let's let qualified people start nonprofit colleges. So if we did that, and we had we had evidence-based education up in the high school level, I think we could easily have people fully fledged, fully ready to go at 21 years old. Maybe they do a year of their first job. Maybe they're kind of fishtailing around a little bit. By the time they're 22, they're off to the races. That means that by the time you're 25 or 26, you're going to be like, I just had 4 or 5 years of building my career, saving money, having fun, kind of being a professional person and having fun. Maybe you live in some crazy city. And then you can start looking around and have a serious relationship and family by the time you're 26, 27, 28. That's perfect timing for that person to be able to have 1 or 2, 3 kids. And by the time they're 35, they have a whole family running off to the races, And I just think that's something we need to do for women, and women should fight for that. I think women should get out there and say, we need earlier enfranchisement. We need earlier enfranchisement, not this like dragging out until you're 32 years old with your master's degree.
Yeah, it's not so cute when they're like, oh, you don't have to be an adult until you're in your mid 30s. And you're like, I might want to.
Exactly.
I'm not allowed to be.
Yeah. Also, what if we made society so that you could have a family and actually be like, universal childcare, and, what if it didn't cost $30,000 to give birth? What if we had, Medicare for all, free childbirth, free,
right. Maybe the maternity leave isn't on the heels paternity of the, leave. Yeah, they're not on the bill of on the tab of the company or so.
Right. So these are all things that would help support families and support women and support children and just make, anyways. Basically,
and you're saying old boy clubs have gone in colleges and universities and institutions where they're just like, we don't have to change it because we are making bank right now.
Exactly.
And there's really no motivation for us to get better because it's not like there's a shortage of students. We have our students.
Well, there actually is a shortage of students.
That's
They're starting to be, because in 2018, people
are getting smart to maybe I don't need to pay.
No, it's just demographics. In 2008, in the financial crisis, for some reason that signaled to people like don't have kids, and the birth rate dropped by 25%, and it has never recovered. Family sizes are just 25% smaller in America since 2008, and 2008 plus 18. Right, is 2026, right? Mm-hmm. So 2026 is the first year that 18-year-olds are going to be, there's 25% fewer 18-year-olds, which means there's 25% fewer college students. So actually there's this huge like rapture date coming, which is 2026.
And institutions are probably seeing that and going, what
colleges are already closing. A lot of colleges are closing and they're consolidating and being kind of bought or closed or whatever. Yeah.
Interesting.
And they'll do way more in 3 years. I mean, 3 years it'll literally be like, decimation of colleges, But and then people might say to me, well, then why would you want to start a new college in that environment? Well, the reason why is because you can make a college that's 10 times better than the legacy colleges. Well,
yeah,
you can make a college that's 3 years long, and you do it all with great professors, and by the end you're hireable in 2 industries, and
Well, and the reason why, I mean, I don't know what your brain is like, but it seems like from the outside you're not like yum 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 yum, give me all those students. You're like you're looking at the way current colleges are, and you're like yuck 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 yuck. Give me a chance to implement a better version of it. Like, can I show you what it looks like when you're not having so much waste, Right. And that doesn't matter with how many students. You're like, the problem is there. I can fix it here.
And I feel like when you say, I'm going to make a 3-year college program, like people think first you're cutting corners. And second, they think, oh, you're trying to do this to like undercut the market by cutting corners. You're basically like a kind of smarmy sort of person if you're trying to do a 3-year program. But my perspective is actually, one, you're helping women. That's like, I honestly, people are going to say maybe that's pandering or something, but I honestly think that there's this huge anxiety with this late enfranchisement. And if we can give people back a year of their lives, to the men, okay, whatever. To the women, it makes a huge difference, right? And then the other thing I think is you're actually just using evidence-based education to actually provide probably even more education than what people get in 4, you can get in 3, because you're doubling the pace of education with evidence-based research, but you're only getting rid of a quarter of the amount of time. So you're actually increasing by 30% or so the amount that people are learning by shortening it.
And the market totally agrees with you, because like if everyone saw the full value of college and agreed with it and thought there's no waste happening there, then like nobody would be going to coding boot camps. They would all be getting 4-year computer science degrees, you know? But they're like, oh, wait, the things I actually need to actually function and actually be enfranchised, I can get those from this chunk of like, of just intense hardcore study. And I'm choosing not to do the 4-year computer science degree for a reason, you know? That's
right.
Interesting.
You're totally right. Yeah, that it would have been really different if we had, you know, accreditation was something that was available to people when the boot camp revolution came about. You know, we might not have even seen boot camps. We might have seen longer, you know, 8-month programs or something that were actually more, because you can criticize boot camp. I worked at a boot camp for a year, and I actually thought it was actually really good for people. Yeah, I mean, basically all entrepreneurship, I teach this in my classes, that all entrepreneurship is really just the failure of existing businesses, right? Because if existing businesses were more flexible, creative, innovative, then there would be no opportunities for any new businesses, right? It's only because of the failures of existing businesses that then you have startups and, you know, people with new ideas and new stuff.
Looking for gaps in the, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, cool. Well, I think I don't know. Yeah, what a weird solution. I hope we didn't tread on women and make a fool of myself here. But
I don't think so. I think
you can blame me.
I think you reasoned yourself and explained what you're talking about. I understand. I'm on board. I think that's good. So getting people power earlier and giving people the tools to be empowered earlier, not just sending them off and going like, figure it out, but like setting them up so that they can be successful. That sounds great.
And not even just sending them off, taking 200,000 of their dollars away from them and then just sending them off with no direct. I mean, that's what our current educational system does. It literally robs you blind, like highway robbery, puts you in debt, and gives you things of almost zero value in terms of, you know, both practical and liberal. I mean, anyways, you guys can read the book if you like, but
I like this solution, Adam.
You're in for the early enfranchisement.
I'm early enfranchisement.
I see. I'm usually pretty self-critical.
Red shirting guys. I'm down.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of the added solution. Yeah, red shirt all men, and then it speed up enfranchisement for everybody. I just don't see any real drawbacks to this. I just see it as like we're being held back from progress by these sort of legacy institutions that are being sort of not greedy because they don't have like profit motive, but sort of they still are kind of just greedy in the sense that they're hoarding they're just ruining everything. You know what I mean? They're for their own kind of benefit. And it's hard. I don't like to like criticize higher educational people individually because I actually don't think any individual is doing this. I think it's more of a systemic problem. And also, I think it's important to really villainize like, you know, petroleum, you know, fuel people because they knowingly have been doing like horrible things. And they actually deserve like villainous status. Higher ed people, you know, I don't want to vilify them. I more just want to be like, look, we could do it so much better.
Right.
Let's just make it better. And they're going to be against it because it's going to hurt them. But I think the public will be for it. And they'll see that I'm not trying to attack anyone. I'm just trying to say, there's a promised land right over there. Let's go over to the promised land.
I mean, you know? Sometimes you got to drag established institutions kicking and streaming into the future, and then they're happy that you did at the end, you know?
Oh, kicking and streaming? Was that a Freudian slip because you worked in a video store when you were young?
I thought I said screaming.
No, you said kicking and streaming.
Oh, boy.
Blockbuster will be dragged kicking and streaming into the future.
I go in 1998, and I'm like, you guys are all going to die when Netflix shows up. Dead. Oh, boy.
And they're like, get out of here. We're the biggest video franchise in
history.
Sir,
your membership is canceled. You're not allowed to rent any more movies.
All right, should we button it up?
I like it. Okay, let's do it.
Thanks, everybody. Solutions from the Multiverse.
Until next time.
Coming in hot.
Thanks for listening.
Take care, everybody. Bye. Hey there, thanks for listening to that episode of Solutions from the Multiverse.
Yeah, we're back with a little after roll. Hello.
Hey, after roll. Roll that after roll. So basically, we want you to subscribe.
Yeah.
And rate and review and tell someone, like take your favorite solution and send it to someone who you think it would like blow their mind to hear it.
Yeah, we love making the show. We're proud of it, and we're excited. We want other people to show. We know that the main way people find podcasts is word of mouth. I know that's true for me. I listen to my friends who also listen to podcasts tell me about ones, and I go, okay, I'm cluing into that. So we want to be part of that chain.
So thanks for being a part of Solutions.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again real soon.
Bye.
Bye.